I answered the door, and the detective said, "We have 6 witnesses who place you at the crime scene." I stood there in my doorway at 9:30 on a Thursday morning, coffee still in my hand, staring at Detective Raymond Kovach and his partner, whose name I didn't catch because my brain had stopped processing information after the word witnesses. I'm Nathan Graves, and up until that moment, I'd been a financial consultant living a perfectly ordinary life in suburban Portland. I'd woken up expecting to work from home, review some client portfolios, maybe grab lunch with my wife Olivia later. Instead, I was looking at 2 detectives with expressions that told me my life was about to implode. 6 witnesses? I finally managed to say. Witnesses to what? What crime scene? Detective Kovach was in his late 50s, gray hair cut military short, face weathered in a way that suggested he'd seen everything twice and believed nothing the first time he heard it. He exchanged a glance with his partner, a younger woman with sharp eyes and a notepad already in her hand. "Mr. Graves, we need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about an assault that took place Monday night at the Roosevelt Bar on Hawthorne. 6 separate individuals have identified you as the person who attacked a man named Julian Vance outside the bar around 11:15. The assault left Vance with a fractured skull, broken jaw, and internal injuries. He's currently in serious condition at Portland General." The words hit me like physical blows. Assault, fractured skull, Monday night. I felt my legs go unsteady and grabbed the doorframe for support. That's impossible. I wasn't anywhere near Hawthorne on Monday night. I was home with my wife. We had dinner and watched a movie. Kovach's expression didn't change. "That's what we'd like to discuss at the station. You're not under arrest, but we strongly encourage you to cooperate with our investigation. We can do this voluntarily, or we can make it official. Your choice." I looked back into my house where Olivia was coming down the stairs, alerted by the voices at the door. She saw the detectives and her face went pale. "Nathan, what's happening? I need to go with them. I'll call you from the station. Don't worry, this is a mistake." But even as I said it, I felt dread settling into my stomach. 6 witnesses. How could 6 people identify me for something I didn't do? The ride to the station was silent. I sat in the back of the unmarked sedan, watching familiar streets pass by, thinking about Julian Vance. I knew the name but couldn't place it immediately. The Roosevelt Bar was a place I'd been to maybe twice in my life, never recently. Monday night I'd been home. I was certain of it. Olivia and I had made pasta, opened a bottle of wine, watched some documentary about ocean conservation. We'd gone to bed around 11. I'd been nowhere near Hawthorne. At the station, they put me in an interview room and left me alone for 20 minutes. I used the time to try and remember anything about Monday that could help. I pulled out my phone and checked my location history. It showed me at home all evening, last movement logged at 6:14 when I'd returned from the grocery store. I screenshotted it, though I wasn't sure if they'd even look at phone data. Kovach and his partner finally came in. The partner introduced herself as Detective Lisa Moreno. She had a folder thick with papers that she set on the table between us. "Mr. Graves," she began, "let's start with your relationship to Julian Vance. Do you know him?" I shook my head. "I recognize the name, but I can't place from where. I don't think I've ever met him." Kovach slid a photo across the table. It showed a man in his mid-30s, athletic build, dark hair, confident smile. The kind of guy who probably played recreational sports and had strong opinions about craft beer. I studied the photo carefully. He looked vaguely familiar in the way that strangers sometimes do, like maybe I'd seen him in a coffee shop or passed him on the street, but I had no specific memory of ever interacting with him. "I don't know him," I said. Moreno made a note. "And you're saying you weren't at the Roosevelt Bar on Monday night?" "I wasn't. I was home with my wife. We had dinner around 7, watched TV, went to bed around 11. I haven't been to the Roosevelt in probably 2 years. Kovach leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Graves, we have 6 witnesses who were at the bar Monday night. They all saw the same thing. A man matching your description followed Julian Vance outside when Vance left around 11:15. In the parking lot, this man attacked Vance without warning, punched him repeatedly, kicked him when he was down. 2 witnesses tried to intervene, and the attacker fled. All 6 witnesses were shown a photo array this morning. All 6 independently identified you." The room seemed to tilt. 6 people identifying me for something I didn't do. How is that possible? "Did you get this attack on surveillance cameras?" I asked. "There must be security footage." Moreno answered. "The bar's exterior cameras were malfunctioning that night. The owner reported it to his security company Tuesday morning, so there's no video of the parking lot. But we have 6 eyewitnesses, Mr. Graves. 6 people who don't know each other, who were all there independently, and who all picked your photo." I felt panic rising. This was insane. I wasn't there. "Can I take a polygraph? Will that help?" Kovach shrugged. "Polygraphs aren't admissible in court, and we don't typically use them in investigations like this. What we need from you is an explanation for why 6 people would identify you if you weren't involved." "I don't know," I said, hearing my voice rise. "I don't know why they'd identify me because I wasn't there. Check my phone records, check my credit cards, check anything. I was home Monday night." Moreno pulled out another document. "We pulled your phone records. Your phone was at your residence Monday evening. Last activity recorded at 6:14, as you mentioned. But Mr. Graves, that doesn't prove you were with your phone. You could have left it at home." I stared at her. Why would I leave my phone at home to go assault someone? That doesn't make sense. She met my eyes steadily. People do unusual things when they're trying to create an alibi. The interview lasted another hour. They asked about my background, my work, any history of violence. I'd never been arrested, never been in a fight since high school, had no criminal record whatsoever. I was a financial consultant who spent my days reviewing investment portfolios and retirement accounts. The idea that I'd followed someone into a parking lot and beaten them nearly to death was absurd, but the detectives weren't treating it as absurd. They were treating it as a solid case with 6 witnesses backing it up. Finally, Kovac said I was free to go, but should expect to hear from them again soon. The district attorney would be reviewing the case. I should get a lawyer. Those words hit hard. Get a lawyer. This was really happening. I called Olivia from the station lobby. She picked up on the first ring. Nathan, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm okay. They let me go, but this is bad. They think I assaulted someone Monday night. There are witnesses who identified me. I need to come home and we need to find a lawyer immediately. The drive home was a blur. When I walked in, Olivia was waiting with her laptop open, already searching for criminal defense attorneys. She hugged me tightly. This is insane. You were here Monday night. We were together. I know. But they have 6 witnesses who say otherwise. I don't understand how this is happening. We spent the afternoon calling lawyers. Most were too busy or wanted retainers we couldn't afford. Finally, we got a call back from an attorney named Juliette Brennan, who had good reviews and specialized in false accusation cases. She could see me the next morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through Monday night over and over. Grocery store at 6, home by 6:15, made pasta with Olivia around 7, watched that ocean documentary on Netflix, went to bed around 11, normal, boring domestic evening. And somewhere across town, Julian Vance had been beaten nearly to death by someone 6 witnesses thought was me. I got up and went to my computer, searching for information about Vance. His social media was semi-private, but I could see he worked in commercial real estate, was married with 2 kids, seemed to live a comfortable life in the West Hills neighborhood. Nothing connected us. We didn't have mutual friends on social media, hadn't gone to the same schools, didn't work in related industries. I'd never had any business dealings with real estate. There was no reason our lives should intersect at all. Juliette Brennan's office was downtown in a building that smelled like old wood and furniture polish. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed and direct, in a way that reminded me of the detectives but from the other side. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. 6 witnesses is extremely problematic. In cases like this, juries tend to trust multiple eyewitnesses, even though research shows eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable. But 6 people all identifying you independently, that's going to be the prosecution's entire case. We need to understand who these witnesses are and why they might be wrong or lying. Could they be wrong? I asked. Just genuinely mistaken? Juliette nodded slowly. Mistaken identity happens, especially in stressful situations at night. But for 6 separate people to all pick the wrong person from a photo array, that would be unusual. More likely, one of 3 scenarios. They're coordinating their stories intentionally. They were influenced by suggestion before the photo array. Or there's something about you that resembles the actual attacker enough that multiple people made the same mistake. None of those help us much unless we can prove it. She outlined the next steps. First, she'd request discovery from the prosecutor once charges were filed, which she expected would happen within days. Second, she'd hire an investigator to look into the witnesses and into Julian Vance himself. Third, we'd build a timeline of my Monday evening with every piece of corroborating evidence we could find. Phone records, credit card statements, anything showing I was elsewhere. Fourth, we'd need Olivia to testify as my alibi witness, though spouse testimony was often viewed skeptically. This is going to be expensive, Juliette warned. A case like this, if it goes to trial, you're looking at $70,000 to $100,000 in legal fees, maybe more. I felt sick. Olivia and I had savings, but not that kind of money. We'd have to borrow against the house, ask family for help, drain our retirement accounts. Our entire financial future destroyed because 6 strangers identified me for a crime I didn't commit. 2 days later, I was formally arrested. Kovac and Moreno showed up at my house with a warrant. The charges were assault in the first degree and attempted murder. Bail was set at $200,000. We had to use a bail bondsman, putting up $20,000 we'd scraped together from savings and a loan from Olivia's parents. The arraignment was humiliating. I stood in an orange jumpsuit in front of a judge who read charges that made me sound like a monster. Attempted murder, 25 years if convicted. Juliette entered a not guilty plea and argued for release on recognizance given my clean record and community ties. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Patricia Holbrook, argued I was a flight risk given the severity of the charges and the strength of the evidence. 6 eyewitnesses, Your Honor. The defendant's own phone records show suspicious behavior, leaving his phone at home on the night of the attack. The evidence is overwhelming. The judge set bail and I was released, but the damage was done. My name was now publicly associated with a brutal assault. The investigator Juliette hired was a man named Gordon Fletcher, ex-police detective turned private investigator with 30 years' experience. He was methodical and skeptical in equal measure. His first question was the same one I'd been asking myself. Why would 6 people lie about this? I don't know, I told him. I've never met any of them as far as I know. I've never met Julian Vance. There's no connection between us. Gordon pulled out a list. The 6 witnesses are David Chen. Wait, I need to check my forbidden names list. Let me recalculate. I can't use Chen. Let me use different names. Gordon pulled out a list. The 6 witnesses are David Riley, Shannon Foster, Marcus. Wait, I can't use Marcus either. Gordon pulled out a list. The 6 witnesses are David Riley, Shannon Foster, Kevin Drummond, Ashley Winters, Gregory Pike, and Nina Castellanos. 2 of them, Riley and Foster, were at the bar together as friends. The other 4 were there separately. None of them know each other according to initial statements. All 6 picked your photo from an array of 8 similar-looking men. That's statistically unlikely unless you actually did it or something else is going on. Over the next week, Gordon investigated each witness. David Riley was a 32-year-old software engineer who'd been at the bar with friends watching a basketball game. Shannon Foster was his friend, worked in marketing, no apparent connection to Vance or to me. Kevin Drummond was a bartender at a different establishment who'd been at the Roosevelt on his night off. Ashley Winters was a graduate student in environmental science. Gregory Pike worked in construction. Nina Castellanos was a nurse. On the surface, they were random people with no connections to each other or to me. But Gordon dug deeper. He found that David Riley and Kevin Drummond both worked out at the same gym, though they claimed not to know each other. Ashley Winters and Gregory Pike had both attended a community meeting about neighborhood development 3 months ago. Nina Castellanos' cousin worked at the same hospital where Julian Vance's wife was a pediatrician. The connections were thin, circumstantial, but they suggested the witnesses weren't as randomly unconnected as they'd initially appeared. Juliet received the discovery documents from the prosecutor. The witness statements were detailed and consistent. All 6 described a man around 6 feet tall, brown hair, athletic build, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. The man had confronted Vance in the parking lot, said something inaudible, then attacked. The beating lasted approximately 90 seconds before Riley and Drummond intervened, at which point the attacker fled on foot, heading east on Hawthorne. The descriptions matched me reasonably well. I was 6'1", had brown hair, athletic build from regular running. But so did millions of men. The clothing description was generic enough to fit half the population. What made their identification powerful was that all 6 had independently picked my photo from the array. Juliet explained how photo arrays worked. Police showed 6 or 8 photos of similar-looking individuals and asked witnesses to identify the perpetrator. If the array was properly constructed and administered, multiple independent identifications carried significant weight. But if the array was suggestive or the witnesses had been contaminated by seeing my photo elsewhere first, their identifications could be worthless. Did the police show them my photo before the array? I asked. Juliet shook her head. Not according to their documentation. But we'll challenge that at trial. We'll argue the witnesses colluded, were influenced by media coverage, or were simply wrong. The problem is proving it. Meanwhile, my life was falling apart in other ways. The arrest made the news. Local business consultant arrested for brutal assault outside downtown bar. My name and photo were published. Clients started calling to terminate their contracts. My firm, where I'd been a junior partner, put me on immediate unpaid leave pending resolution of the charges. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. Someone spray-painted liar on our garage door. Olivia held strong, but I could see the strain. She believed me completely, but the weight of being married to someone facing attempted murder charges was crushing. Her family was supportive but worried. My own parents, retired in Arizona, flew up to be with us. My mother cried when she saw me. How is this happening? You've never hurt anyone in your life. I wish I knew, Mom. I wish I understood any of this. Gordon's investigation continued. He interviewed people who'd been at the Roosevelt that night, but hadn't come forward as witnesses. Several remembered the assault, but none of them could identify the attacker. One man, a regular named Thomas Wright, said the attacker had his hood up and it was dark in the parking lot. I didn't get a good look at his face. Could have been anyone. So why had 6 other people been so certain it was me? Juliet filed motions to suppress the eyewitness identifications, arguing the photo array was improperly suggestive. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, I was stuck in limbo. No job, no income, mounting legal bills, and the constant weight of knowing I might go to prison for 25 years for something I didn't do. I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning unable to breathe, convinced I was going to be convicted. Olivia would hold me and remind me that truth mattered, that evidence mattered, that the system would work. But I'd seen enough crime documentaries to know innocent people went to prison all the time, especially when eyewitnesses were involved. Then Gordon found something. He'd been digging into Julian Vance's background and discovered that Vance was involved in a contentious real estate development project. A group of investors wanted to demolish a historic building in southeast Portland to build luxury condos. Neighborhood activists had been fighting the project for months. At a heated community meeting 5 weeks before the assault, there had been shouting matches and threats. Julian Vance had been the public face of the development, and he'd made enemies. Gordon showed me video from the community meeting. Vance stood at a podium defending the project while angry residents shouted him down. Several people made statements that could be interpreted as threatening. One man yelled that Vance would regret destroying the neighborhood. A woman said Vance deserved whatever happened to him. The anger was palpable and real. Could someone have attacked Vance because of the development dispute? I asked. Absolutely, Gordon said. And if they wanted to deflect suspicion, they might recruit witnesses to identify someone else. Someone random who looked vaguely similar to the actual attacker. You were convenient. The theory was far-fetched, but it was something. Juliet filed an amended motion arguing that the assault was connected to Vance's development work and that witnesses had been incentivized or coerced into identifying me to protect the real attacker. The prosecutor dismissed it as conspiracy theory nonsense. Your Honor, Patricia Holbrook argued at a hearing, the defense is trying to create elaborate alternative theories to distract from simple facts. 6 witnesses identified the defendant. The defendant has no alibi except his wife. The evidence is clear. The judge seemed skeptical of our development theory, but allowed us to continue investigating. Gordon kept digging. He found that Gregory Pike, one of the witnesses, had attended multiple community meetings opposing the development. So had Ashley Winters. They'd both signed petitions against the project. That meant at least 2 of the 6 witnesses had direct connections to opposition to Vance's project. That couldn't be coincidence. Juliet subpoenaed records from the community organization leading the opposition. The leader was a woman named Francine Delacroix, a longtime neighborhood activist with a reputation for fierce dedication to historic preservation. When Gordon tried to interview her, she refused to speak with him. That raised more red flags. If she had nothing to hide, why refuse an interview? We were 10 weeks from trial when Gordon finally got the break we needed. He'd been surveilling the witnesses, hoping to document contact between them that would prove collusion. On a Sunday afternoon, he followed David Riley to a coffee shop on Division Street, where Riley met with Shannon Foster. That wasn't suspicious since they were friends. But then Kevin Drummond showed up. Then Gregory Pike. Then Ashley Winters. 5 of the 6 witnesses meeting together at a coffee shop, months after the assault, weeks before trial. Gordon photographed them through the window, got video of them talking animatedly, clearly coordinating something. When they left, he followed Drummond, who drove directly to a house in the Selwood neighborhood. The house belonged to Francine Delacroix. Drummond went inside and stayed for 90 minutes. When he left, Gordon photographed him shaking hands with Delacroix on her porch. Juliet filed an emergency motion with the photos and video attached. Your Honor, these witnesses are not independent. They're meeting together, coordinating testimony, and at least one is directly connected to the activist who opposed the victim's development project. This is a conspiracy to frame my client for a crime he didn't commit. The judge ordered an evidentiary hearing. All 6 witnesses were subpoenaed to testify under oath about their relationships and contacts. The hearing was devastating to the prosecution's case. Under cross-examination by Juliet, David Riley initially denied knowing the other witnesses beyond Shannon Foster. Then, Juliet showed him the coffee shop photos. Riley's face went pale. He stammered that they'd met a few times to compare notes about what they'd seen, just to make sure their memories were accurate. Juliet pounced. So you colluded to coordinate your testimony? That's not independent identification, Mr. Riley. That's conspiracy. Kevin Drummond was worse. He denied knowing Francine Delacroix until confronted with photos of him leaving her house. Then he claimed he'd been doing odd jobs for her, home repairs. When asked what repairs, he couldn't provide specifics. Juliet asked if he'd been paid. Drummond hesitated. Some. Under the table. And did Miss Delacroix ever discuss Julian Vance with you? Drummond's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Drummond finally admitted that Delacroix had mentioned Vance was destroying the neighborhood and someone needed to stop him. Gregory Pike admitted under oath that he'd attended community meetings opposing Vance's development. So did Ashley Winters. Nina Castellanos, the 6th witness, broke down crying on the stand. She admitted that her cousin, who worked with Vance's wife, had recruited her to be a witness, had told her it was important to identify the right person, had shown her my photo before the police photo array and said this is the guy who did it. That was illegal witness tampering. The conspiracy unraveled rapidly after that. Francine Delacroix was brought in for questioning and initially refused to testify, invoking her Fifth Amendment rights. But faced with multiple witnesses implicating her in witness coordination, she eventually admitted through her lawyer that she'd organized the false identifications because Vance was ruining the neighborhood and someone needed to pay. She'd found out about the assault, realized the actual attacker was someone from her activist group, and decided to protect them by recruiting witnesses to identify a random person instead. I was that random person. She'd pulled my photo from a professional networking site because I vaguely resembled the actual attacker. Then she'd shown my photo to people she knew or could recruit, told them I was the one who'd hurt Vance, and convinced them to identify me in the police array. Some knew they were lying. Others, like Nina Castellanos, had been manipulated into believing they'd actually seen me. The charges against me were dropped immediately. Patricia Holbrook, the prosecutor, issued a terse statement apologizing for the miscarriage of justice, but noting that the false identifications had been sophisticated and deliberate. Francine Delacroix was charged with conspiracy to commit perjury, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and filing false reports. David Riley, Kevin Drummond, Gregory Pike, and 2 others were also charged as co-conspirators. Nina Castellanos, was given immunity in exchange for testimony about how the conspiracy worked. The media coverage was intense. Local activist frames innocent man for attempted murder to protect real attacker. My name was finally cleared publicly, but the damage lingered. I'd lost my job, depleted our savings, spent 3 months believing I might go to prison for 25 years. Olivia and I both needed therapy to process the trauma. The civil lawsuit came next. Juliette connected me with a litigation firm that specialized in malicious prosecution cases. We sued Francine Delacroix, the false witnesses, and eventually reached a settlement. The money helped rebuild our financial stability, but couldn't erase the months of terror and uncertainty. Julian Vance recovered from his injuries. The actual attacker was identified through the conspiracy investigation. It turned out to be another neighborhood activist who'd been enraged by Vance's development project and attacked him impulsively. That person was arrested and charged. The development project was eventually canceled, though not because of the assault, because financing fell through. Francine Delacroix was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. At her sentencing, the judge condemned her actions harshly. You took an innocent man and tried to destroy his life to serve your political agenda. You weaponized the justice system and undermined legitimate witness testimony everywhere. Your activism crossed into criminal conspiracy, and you showed no remorse until confronted with irrefutable evidence. The consequences of your actions could have sent Mr. Graves to prison for decades. That is unconscionable. Delacroix maintained she'd been protecting the neighborhood and doing what was necessary. The judge was unmoved. Nothing justified what you did. Nothing. The co-conspirators received probation and community service. Nina Castellanos, who'd been manipulated, faced no charges but lived with the guilt of nearly helping send an innocent person to prison. I tried to return to my normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. The financial consulting firm wouldn't rehire me despite the charges being dropped. Too much reputational damage, they said. Clients wouldn't trust me. I eventually started my own small consulting practice, working from home, rebuilding slowly. Some former clients returned, others never did. The stigma of having been accused, even when proven innocent, never fully disappeared. Olivia and I moved to a different neighborhood where people didn't know our story. We wanted a fresh start somewhere our garage wouldn't be vandalized and neighbors wouldn't whisper when we walked by. The new house was smaller, but it felt safer, like we could rebuild our lives without the constant weight of public judgment. The trauma stayed with me in unexpected ways. I became hypervigilant about documentation, photographing receipts, keeping detailed calendars, maintaining location tracking on my phone constantly. The idea that I could be accused of something and unable to prove my innocence had fundamentally changed how I approached daily life. Olivia worried I was becoming paranoid, but she understood. We'd both learned that truth wasn't always enough, that evidence could be fabricated, that coordinated lies could nearly destroy an innocent person. I testified at Francine Delacroix's trial, describing the months of terror, the financial devastation, the psychological toll of believing I might spend decades in prison. Her defense attorney tried to paint me as collateral damage in a larger fight for community preservation. The jury didn't buy it. They convicted her on all counts. 3 years later, I still carry documentation of that Monday night everywhere. Netflix viewing history showing the ocean documentary watched at our address. Credit card receipt from the grocery store at 6:14. Phone location data. Not because I expect to be falsely accused again, but because the experience taught me that innocence requires proof, and memory isn't enough when people are willing to lie. That Thursday morning when Detective Kovac said 6 witnesses had identified me, I'd had no idea my life was about to be destroyed by a conspiracy I didn't know existed. But I'd fought back with evidence, legal advocacy, and investigative work that eventually exposed the truth. Justice had been served, though it came slowly and at enormous cost. I survived with my freedom, and eventually my reputation intact. The witnesses who lied faced consequences. The woman who orchestrated it went to prison. But I'd learned that the system designed to protect the innocent could be weaponized by those willing to lie convincingly enough. And that lesson, once learned, never goes away. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Gordon hadn't photographed that coffee shop meeting, if we hadn't found the connections between the witnesses and the development project. Would I have been convicted based on 6 eyewitnesses? Would I be in prison right now, serving decades for a crime I didn't commit? The thought keeps me awake some nights. But I also think about the moment when Nina Castellanos broke down on the stand and admitted the truth, when the conspiracy shattered and my innocence became undeniable. That moment when the judge dismissed all charges and I walked out of the courtroom a free man, truly free for the first time in months. Olivia had been waiting in the hallway. We'd held each other and cried. The detective who'd arrested me, Raymond Kovac, had apologized afterward, said he'd followed the evidence as presented and the witness identifications had seemed credible. I appreciated the apology, though it didn't undo the damage. The system had failed me even while following proper procedures, because the system assumed witnesses told the truth. When 6 people coordinate to lie, even good detectives can be fooled. I became an advocate for criminal justice reform afterward, particularly around eyewitness testimony. I spoke at legal conferences about my experience, about how easily false identifications could be coordinated, about the need for better safeguards and corroboration requirements. Some prosecutors pushed back, saying my case was an extreme outlier. Maybe it was. but one innocent person nearly imprisoned was one too many. Olivia and I rebuilt our marriage stronger than before. The crisis had tested us, but we'd held together. We'd learned we could survive the worst and come out intact. We had a daughter now, born 2 years after the charges were dropped. I looked at her and thought about how close I'd come to missing her entire childhood, locked away for something I didn't do. That thought made me hold her tighter. The woman who organized the conspiracy, Francine Delacroix, was released after serving 3 years. I heard she'd moved to a different city, worked in nonprofit management under a different name. Part of me wanted to confront her, demand answers for why she'd chosen me specifically. But another part knew there were no answers that would satisfy. I'd been convenient, random, wrong place in her search for scapegoats. Years later, I carry the scars, but also the knowledge that I survived. That truth eventually emerged. That coordinated lies, no matter how sophisticated, could be exposed by persistence and evidence. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy, and it nearly destroyed everything I'd built. But I'd made it through, and that was something. Not victory exactly, but survival with integrity intact. And sometimes, in a world where 6 people can coordinate to frame an innocent man, survival is enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.